Men don't fall in love with perfect women. They fall in love with real women. Hey, it's Shen here, the founder of Commitment Triggers and Shen Media, where we teach you how to show up to be a high-value, high-status woman whom easily inspires a deep sense of emotional commitment from men. Now, did you ever watch that movie back late in the 90s with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts, Pretty Woman? If you haven't, it's definitely worth your time, but if you've seen it, then let me ask you a simple question. Why, or specifically, how did a high status and rich lawyer, Richard Gere, end up falling in love with a woman who sells her body for a living and apparently didn't have any class, didn't have any education, or any of the other characteristics that society tells us that we should have? Perhaps love is blind, or perhaps there are other factors at play here. So let me come back to what the answer is a bit later on. Now, here's something interesting about men and falling in love. In all my research, in all my studies into why men and women fall in love, I've come across some very, very interesting and very surprising discoveries, I guess. For example, men tend to fall in love within hours of meeting a woman. In other words, the biological processes of falling in love for a man happens rather quickly. And we're talking about the cascade of dopamine, the oxytocin, and the vasopressin in the brain. But let's not get too geeky here. I don't want to overwhelm you with science talk. But what this really means for you is that when it comes to dating, the first few hours or the first few interactions are probably the most important. I mean, that doesn't mean a romance couldn't ensue later on down the track. It just demonstrates the speed in which falling in love occurs. Another thing I've noticed and found interesting was, the more effort you put into wanting someone to like you, the less likely they'll fall in love with you. I mean, isn't that ironic? I believe one of the biggest roadblocks to romance is our need and desire to be perfect. It's our desire to be enough that is causing us so much of our pain and suffering. If I could only just be enough, if I could just be tall enough, pretty enough, thin enough, smart enough, then perhaps I am worthy of love. Perhaps I'll find that man who loves me. And perhaps then he won't leave me again. Even though we all theoretically and intellectually know that nobody in this world is perfect, we still chase after this idea of perfection, don't we? And look, there is nothing wrong with chasing perfection. It is by all means a good thing. I mean, think about this. An artist chases perfection and takes their art to a whole new realm. An athlete chases perfection and sets a new standard for the rest of the world, right? A designer chases perfection and creates a brand new paradigm of thinking. So this chasing perfection is useful, but however, and this is a big however, when it comes to love and romance, the pursuit of perfection is perhaps your biggest enemy. That's right, the pursuit of perfection kills love and romance, because for as long as you're trying to be perfect, you can't be fully engaged with a man. You can't be fully present and fall into that moment. You can't feel the subtle emotions that are required for passion, for romance to exist. You're simply just too busy in your own head being caught up with, this idea of perfection. Am I perfect? Am I enough? Because you need to remember this, perfectionists aren't really happy people. So the truth really is that men simply don't fall in love with perfect women. In order to fall in love deeply, a man has to be able to relate to you. It's a bit hard to relate to someone when they're stuck in their own head, isn't it? I mean, when we try to be perfect, we're really just stuck in our own head. So if you feel like you're having to strive towards something, strive towards being imperfect. I mean, think about it. Julia Roberts wasn't trying to be perfect in that movie Pretty Woman. She was as imperfect as things get, just like you and I deep down inside. Men fall in love with imperfect women because these women are real. Now, I know what you're thinking, but don't all the perfect women get all the attention? Well, yes and no. Sure, men as a collective whole may be fascinated by those so-called perfect women and perhaps even give them most of their collective attention. That's true. But there's a huge difference between attention and love. It's a difference that sometimes can be difficult to see and notice when you're chasing after attention, but perhaps when you've reached to that top of the pyramid of attention, then you will suddenly realize that how empty attention is. I mean, think about all these Hollywood stars that have overdosed and killed themselves, right? They didn't do it because they didn't have enough attention. The truth really is that attention is cheap. It's like those cheap snacks that you hide in your cupboards that only add inches to the waistline. But god damn it, they're so tasty. The truth is rather simple. Men may give superficial attention to those perfect women, but they fall deeply in love with those who are imperfect, who are real. So which one would you rather choose if you could only choose one? Would you rather choose men giving you attention, or would you rather choose men actually falling in love with you emotionally? I mean, it's a real difficult decision, I know. Because the perfect thing about love and romance is that it isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be two individuals, two people sharing authentically and relating spontaneously. It's this pursuit of perfection that is sometimes preventing ourselves from being absolutely authentic and absolutely spontaneous versions of ourselves. Again, men don't fall in love with perfect women. They fall in love with real women, women who are imperfect. So perhaps the most perfect thing to give yourself right now is the permission to be imperfect. Just the permission to be imperfect. Perfection is the wrong game to play. And this all reminds me of when I was in my teenage years, I was playing a lot of competitive golf. Now, I know you're laughing right now. Golf is not just an old man sport, okay? All right, maybe it is, but at least I thought I was cool. Anyhow, I was young, I was stupid, I was naive, and I fell into this trap of becoming too fascinated with my own golf swing. I mean, everywhere I went, I analyzed my own golf swing in the reflections of mirrors and glass panels. I mean, I was obsessed. I used to even record my own swing on my old camcorder and play it back over and over again just to analyze my own golf swing, because deep down inside I thought that, hey, if my swing was perfect, then everything would be okay, everything would be great. And boy, was I an idiot, right? What I didn't realize was that nobody was keeping score of what my golf swing even looked like. Nobody even cared. And as a result, I lost track of what really actually mattered, which, by the way, was to shoot a good score and actually winning tournaments. I mean, hello, that's what golf was all about, right? Unfortunately, a golf swing that is aesthetically pleasing is useless, absolutely useless. Perhaps you're chasing after a certain type of perfection that is taking your focus off what really matters. Perhaps chasing perfection or chasing attention is sabotaging the possibility of men falling in love with you. Just maybe. Because remember this, men fall in love with imperfect women, women who are real. So take a moment, look around you, just look around. Men everywhere are falling deeply in love with those women who are not perfect. If you would look, you would see many, many examples of this, right? Many would suggest that, an actor, for example, Hugh Jackman's wife, isn't so perfect, but it didn't stop him from falling in love with her. Or similar things could be said about Pierce Brosnan's wife, Keely. And of course, there are countless of other examples if you just looked around. You see, in the eyes of men, this is what happens. In the eyes of men, these imperfect women suddenly become every single bit perfect because they're real. Falling in love is real. It's a real experience and it can't be faked. Perhaps love is blind, or perhaps love is not about being perfect. So don't chase perfection. Your imperfections are worth more than that. Alright, whilst I've got you here, I just want to tell you about something important that I've discovered through helping and coaching men and women. What I've discovered is that there are universally two traits of women that men routinely fall in love with regardless of her age, culture, or belief systems. There are two traits. And what I mean by this is that of all the women that men adore and cherish, these women always exhibit these two traits. Now, would you like to know what these traits are? Well, these traits are, but I won't get into that because that is really for another episode of Commitment Triggers. So make sure you tune in and join me for that. Now, if you want to learn more about the specifics of how to inspire a man to fall in love with you and want to deeply commit to you and you only, then this is definitely for you. So I don't want you to ever miss out on any future videos. So make sure you subscribe and stay subscribed. Now, if you haven't signed up to my email newsletter, this is a good time to do so. Just head over to commitmenttriggers.com. That's commitmenttriggers.com. All right, so now I want you to do some reflection and leave a comment below to share with us what kind of experiences have you had with men in love. Now really think about it. What kind of women do men fall in love with in your experience? And until next time, make sure you look after yourself, give yourself the resources you need so that you can show up as the high value, high status woman that you were meant to be. This is Shen with another episode of Commitment Triggers, and I'll talk to you real soon.